Welcome to Season 3 of Writing in the Tiny House podcast. For Seasons 1 and 2, we compiled an entire library of tips and tricks you can follow to improve your writing. For Season 3, we are making a mini-series of episodes revolving around a short story in the public domain, so you can see the principles in Seasons 1 and 2 in action. Each mini-series starts with a performance of the story done by me, Devin Davis, and the other episodes are a discussion with a guest. The current story of interest is Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown. If you wish to support this podcast, please become a patron on Patreon, or get onto the eShop and pick up a hoodie or other Writing in the Tiny House podcast merch. The links are in the show notes. Hello and welcome to the discussion episodes of Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown. I am Devin Davis. I am the host of this show, and I am also a fantasy author.
I'm Chrissy Barton, and I am a copy editor with Little Syllables, and I'm here to help Devin hash it all out.
So join us today as we join hands with our neighbors and commune with the devil. Welcome back to this second discussion episode on Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown. Chrissy's here with me. Chrissy, say hi to our friends.
Hi.
So let's dive into the characters of this allegory. So, Chrissy, right from the off, who do we have in this allegory?
We've got Young Goodman Brown and his wife Faith are the first two that we see. Well, they're young people and they're married recently, and in the
right, they've been married for 3 months.
3 whole months. In the context of the allegory, they could be like the Adam and Eve, or they're kind of like the man and the woman. Or you could look at Faith as his figurative faith.
Right, Faith can represent his relationship to his religion. But it's interesting that you brought up the Adam and Eve story, because that's something that I read too when I was kind of researching what all of this could be about, was getting into the Adam and Eve story. And so with this, you have Goodman Brown, good man, Brown. It's like the most, the most broad basic name ever of what a person could be, and then his wife Faith. And so the fact that they are young and that they have been married for just such a short time suggests an amount of innocence and amount of like newness to the world, probably newness to adulthood and to married life. And that really fits in with the Adam and Eve story. I mean, in that story in the Bible, Adam and Eve are in a perpetual state of innocence and whatever. They don't understand much about the world. And oddly enough, in that story, when Eve talks to the devil, she gets information that does not make her life easier. And that happens in this allegory too with Goodman Brown. So we have Faith, we have Goodman Brown. And what is the setup with this story? What happens first?
Well, first we see young Goodman Brown getting ready to leave in the evening. And so he's bidding her farewell and kissing her goodbye, whatever. And she's begging him not to go, but he's going anyway.
Right. And it kind of makes me wonder why. I mean, because this is an allegory, we can pretend that this is all just genius writing from Nathaniel Hawthorne. But this is one of the little points that just me as a writer and me as a reader, a modern reader, if this were a modern story instead of, you said 1835, I thought it was actually published later than that, I would want to know Goodman Brown's intentions with going into the forest.
It almost seems like he's going to prove that he can resist the devil. It almost seems like he thinks he's gonna come back and be fine afterwards, you know? I don't know. That's the way I read it
Right?
anyway.
I mean, I can definitely see that. At the same time, though, it kind of makes me wonder if this was meant to be kind of a way of saying that all of us secretly, in some way, have a relationship to temptation or to our darker side of ourselves. And all of us, in some way, at some time, want to explore that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's great. Yeah.
I also think that's kind of a leap, though. It's one of those things that I kind of wish in the writing was was a little bit more expounded on. But whatever,
Hmm.
whatever is fine. So he bids farewell to his wife Faith. We can pretend like this is also parting ways for a season from his religion, from his, from his other way of life. Like, I've been living this way for, up until this moment in my life anyway. I'm going to take a break and kind of see
Hmm.
what lies in this forest. So he does that. And then who do we happen upon?
Well, he meets a fellow traveler who looks like his father, and, he's the devil.
And he's the devil.
He's the devil.
Right. No, so he meets a traveler. So it says he looks like his dad. The writing also says that it looks like him, that it looks like himself, but like older. And I don't know about you, but this is not the first allegory that I've read where a person meets an older version of themselves.
Hmm.
Um, I couldn't I couldn't really find any others that I had read, but that trope seems common to me. Venturing into this like dark unknown thing and happening upon another version of yourself feels like something I've read before.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
So that's fine. So he comes upon this fellow traveler, and the traveler meets him and greets him and talks to him in actually pretty familiar terms. It seemed to me that this is actually a person that he knows. And
Yeah.
right, I mean, right away he calls him friend, or at least the traveler calls him friend, and reminds him that, I mean, the traveler reminds him that he helped Goodman Brown's grandfather when he was beating a Quaker woman so smartly through the streets of Salem. So that's important to know. But it's interesting in the writing that this is Goodman Brown and the devil, and yet there is no contention in between them at this point in time. Like, things are pretty casual, things are pretty familiar, and I like that detail. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's the first time they met.
No, it doesn't seem like the first time, though it doesn't say that it's
Yeah,
the first or second time. He just says that he met his dad, which is cool, or his grandfather.
right.
They carry on, and what is the cool thing about, like, what's the object that the traveler is carrying with him?
He has a staff that looks like a snake, which, there's some pretty obvious symbolism there as well. And it
Right? Some
looks like it's
Old Testament
alive.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Referring back to the story of Adam and Eve, we have a serpent with
Hmm.
us, and we know that the serpent in Christian scripture often represents the devil.
Yep.
What happens after this point? We get a new character that comes into the story.
Yes, they see Goody Cloyce coming from the village who taught young Goodman Brown when he was young. And actually, an interesting thing I found was that that character is actually named after one of the witches who was killed in Salem. Well, one of the women who was accused of witchcraft that was killed in Salem during the witch trials.
Oh my
So that's
goodness.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, Goody
Yeah, I
Cloyce
read
was a
that.
witch in the witch trials.
Is
What about the other Goody at the end? Like, remember, there's another Goody at the end
there
of this
another one?
story who there is another Goody who was determined to be
Oh, yeah.
Queen of Hell.
Seems like a
Oh, it's
good
not. It's
goal.
not Goody. Is it Martha Carrier?
Oh
Yeah,
yes,
Martha Carrier. It's not another Goody.
she's also named after a real person from the witch trials.
Another witch?
I think so.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love
It's like
that.
he did this on
Okay,
purpose.
so I know it's like he like researched things and then
Uh-huh.
included it in his allegory, and that's good writing. We have Goody Cloyce, and how is she? How does she behave when she comes upon Goodman Brown and the Traveler?
She's funny. I thought she was funny because
No, I
Goodman
did
Brown
too.
is,
Like just this like busybody kind of middle-aged
yeah.
or older woman. Uh-huh.
Hmm. Yeah, and Goodman Brown is like worried about what she's gonna think seeing them together. But then the lady just greets the devil because she knows him. They're old pals. And yeah,
Right? Like you do, because when you come upon the devil, it's
like
okay
you
to
do.
pretend to be friends. And this is actually another point in the story that I kind of wish that there was more of. Here, I mean, in Puritan culture, to claim to know the devil would be enough to get you burned at the stake. And so I understand that in the writing at the time that Nathaniel Hawthorne was doing this, I mean, to know the devil was already a really big implication. But in the writing, it doesn't say how she knows him. It just simply says that she knows him and doesn't
Hmm.
go into how that relationship came to be. And I kind of wish that I knew that.
You need more backstory.
I know, me and backstory. It's hard to do backstory when you just have this tiny allegory and there's not enough, a lot of room for anything.
Hmm.
Goody Cloyce approaches the traveler. She asks to have the traveler escort her to where she was going. And the traveler says, instead, come take my staff. And so he gives his serpent staff to her, and she carries on her way and kind of goes out of sight, I guess. Later, you have Deacon Gookin. And who is the other gentleman that was with him?
The minister. Know
The
if he had a
minister
name.
and Deacon Gookin, right?
Yeah.
They don't actually talk to the traveler, do they?
Mm-mm.
They
No,
just
he just,
exchange words with each other.
yeah, he overhears them.
That's interesting. I know that Deacon Gookin shows up later at that big communion. So interesting how that works in the
Well,
storytelling of this allegory.
I think they're all there at the end.
Yeah, all of Salem
Yeah.
Village.
Well, the minister and yeah, all of them.
The minister and the deacon and Goody Cloyce and this other lady that I mentioned and all of Salem
Hmm.
Village. I think he
Yeah.
recognizes the whole village there. Is it after, let's see, after Deacon Gookin and the minister pass by, is this when young Goodman Brown kind of gives up and becomes this like shadowy figure flying through the forest?
Well, first, he decides he's not going to keep going. Or maybe it was before the minister. He decides he's not going to keep going. So the devil keeps going without him. And then I think it's after he hears the minister and the deacon. And then he hears like a bunch of people flying over him. And he sees the pink ribbons fluttering down.
Right? And all of this matters because he becomes this like dark figure and he has his own staff that he has fashioned from a branch. He has his own staff and it talks about him becoming like this really dark and shadowy, like ominous figure flying around in this dark forest. And the forest represents sin. With his staff, I picture a witch. Like I picture this dark person like flying around on a witch's broom, and I like it. I really like the way that all of this was described. I really liked this part of the story. After he sees that his faith, his wife, has been taken and is with this group of villagers or like the whole village in the forest, the actual devil shows up in like this huge display of like magic and burning trees and announces to everyone, but probably like he's speaking to young Goodman Brown and Faith, right? He's speaking to them both. And he's just kind of outing all of the things that have happened in the village. Like the woman who has killed her husband, or like the old man who is chasing after the young girls, or the young woman who has potentially had like an abortion in her house and is bearing this unborn child.
Hmm.
All of these things have happened in the village, and the devil, the big devil, like there's no mistake about that. He's not appearing to be young Goodman Brown's dad or whatever
Yeah.
else. Like he is the fiend. He announces it all. And the
Hmm.
way that this affects young Goodman Brown is he loses his faith. And it seems the result of that with his wife, Faith, like they still stay together, they still have children. It doesn't seem like there is much happiness for them after this big experience. And I don't know, like the way that this story ends is like the most depressing sentence in the whole world. It says, besides neighbors, not a few, that like this is when young Goodman Brown is dead and they're talking about carving his headstone. It's like they carved no hopeful verse upon his tombstone, for his dying hour was gloom. So I mean, they did it all. We met with the devil in a casual way. We communed with the
Hmm.
devil in a really big, obvious way with the entire village. And now we led a life full of gloom and sadness.
And I was kind of, it leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not this really happened to him or if it was a dream. And so, like, the way he and Faith carry on and live their whole lives made me wonder if, it only happened for him and not for her. Because I don't know. I guess maybe in that culture there'd be no real way for them to split up anyway. But you know, why would they have kids and stuff if
No,
they
I,
both
I
knew the
doubt
other
they.
one had gone to the devil?
Well, and I would
Yeah.
imagine that in Puritan culture, you didn't get to divorce and remarry. I'm sure that wasn't a thing that
Right.
got to happen. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that bearing children was probably and strongly encouraged to the point of being
Yeah.
inappropriate. Like you get to bear children if you're a married woman, probably.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I mean they went about it, and it's I like the point that you shared about how maybe Faith wasn't really actually a part of this, and this was just a dream, and this is why kind of the marriage got to carry on, even if it wasn't really in a fullness of like joy or
Mm-hmm.
happiness, just because Faith may not have actually been a part of this. But I do like how the writing makes it all seem very dreamlike. At the same time, like the sacrament or whatever that happens at the end with the devil is
Mm-hmm.
pretty descriptive in the setting. And I don't know, like I can understand how that could all be dream stuff, but I get carried back to like the original Fantasia at the end with like the demon coming out of the mountain with like all of his fiends all around him, because there were also fiends in the congregation. There were also devils
Oh,
with the villagers. And
nice.
I don't know, I just really like the description of the burning trees and like the water and the rock
Mm-hmm.
and whatever else, because like the devil full on does some form of baptism to young Goodman Brown and his wife Faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was really, really bold of Nathaniel Hawthorne to even dare to go there in the 1830s.
Right? I kind of wonder what the reception was at the time, Like if people were
hmm
offended by it or what? I don't know.
Because I don't know. I mean, even with things like baptism nowadays, I mean, to our listeners, Chrissy and I know a lot of the same people, and there are definitely some religious terms that you kind of don't play around with. And one of them is
Hmm.
baptism, and it's full on here, and the devil does it, and you totally know what it's for.
And that is it for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you wish to support this podcast, please become a patron on Patreon or pick up some merch from the eShop. And be sure to follow me on social media. The links to all of this are in the show notes. And as always, have a good time writing.